Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Friends, so tonight I was just going through what myself and others have been talking about over the last 2 weeks. I'm in a good position, lots of Dhamma friends, lots of good Dhamma conversations. And people tend to work together to develop these themes. We might not realize it, but this happens in lay life too. People are talking about similar things at similar times, but it's happening in Dhamma circles. We're working through trying to understand different themes at different times, and we're all kind of pitching in our ideas. Looking at the last couple of weeks, a lot that I've been talking on and discussing with people has dealt with faith and with wisdom and with the powerful impact these have on our practice and our development in the Buddhist teachings. And tonight I thought I would speak a little bit about how we deal with dilemmas. Because I don't know that this is addressed all the time, but is definitely a crucial factor of why faith and wisdom are important, but also constitutes, a lot of our work on the path is dealing with what are called dilemmas. So the word dilemma means an unpleasant choice. And another way of phrasing it is maybe a choice between unpleasant options. And we'll probably see immediately that, yeah, this happens in life. So tonight I'm not going to be, once again, Tahn Pamutto is not going to be talking about a meditation technique that will help you get into samadhi. I'm not going to be saying exactly how you do sense restraint, so it's always going to work. Because when we really look at our practice, whether we get half an hour, a day or every other day, or like myself, 2 or 3, sometimes a bit more hours of formal meditation. Meditation is not everything in our practice. We get up from the cushion and we go out and we do things in the world. It's absolutely necessary. Some of the best we can do is to have a sixth or a quarter of our day in formal meditation. But that still means the vast majority is off the cushion. But that doesn't have to be a problem in and of itself, because if we have faith and wisdom and we know how to use these things, then the situations we're presented with in real life will be an extension of our practice and will in fact be the way that we apply our practice. Because samadhi is one factor of the Eightfold Path. And it comes about through peaceful and skillful living. It is the culmination, in a way, of the Eightfold Path. But how do we live peacefully? How do we live skillfully? And how do we keep ourselves from getting entangled so that samadhi is even possible? And this is the meat of applying what we've learned and applying what we're practicing with to everyday situations that really pays off. It gives us peace in the moment, and it gives us peace in a cumulative way. So what I mean by dilemmas, on a vast scale, we have like social dilemmas, like do you raise the interest rates to curb inflation, but you'll tamp down the economy? Or do you leave things alone and risk that you'll have runaway inflation? Or do you speak up for an ally who's being attacked by a neighbor, knowing that there could be retaliation? Or do you stay quiet and your ally gets demolished, but you don't risk anything? You see, these are options where both sides of the scenario has unpleasant aspects. And it's very important to note that this is essential to the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha teaches about what's called dukkha, or suffering. It's like, talking about suffering again, but it's to a point. It's to recognize that there are dilemmas. And this is actually a very great thing about being a Buddhist, is you can recognize, yeah, there are difficult choices. And the fact that the choice is difficult, or that the answer is not obvious, means that we're accepting that there is dukkha in life, that there are, sometimes we're making a choice and the way is not obvious, either because we have incomplete information or we can't predict how things will turn out. And this is where faith and wisdom become our supports. The Buddha categorically said, we shouldn't follow a course of action simply because we were told to, or because it's the tradition of our teacher, or because it's our social tradition, or even because we have worked it out for ourselves logically. He said, these are not good reasons to follow a course of action. But he said, when you yourself have seen that something is unwholesome, time and again, abandon it. And when you've seen something as wholesome, time and again, you should cultivate it. And that can be your compass. And this is an application of both faith and wisdom, as we can see. So faith deals with, how do we relate to having imperfect information, right? And this is a lot of our choices. We can't read minds, so we don't know what's going on in the mind of other people. We have to say something, but we don't know if we're saying the right thing. Or we've heard something from somebody and we're having to make a decision based on secondhand information, and we've got to try to figure out, do we trust the source or do we go with our intuition? This is where faith comes in. And faith, as the Buddha taught, is confidence. And in a lot of ways, faith is making decisions in the present based on past information. So we don't start and immediately know what's right and wrong. And this is the value of having good friends in the spiritual path, is we begin to, maybe we just recognize we're not always getting it right. Maybe that we're making bad decisions. And that in and of itself is a certain kind of humility and discipline that arises. And it says, well, I'm not always getting it right, but I would like to do better. So you were saying, this is the best kind of friend, is somebody who is trying, wants to get better. And we can develop confidence when we see there are people in the world who are doing better at what we're struggling with, whether it's dealing with anger, or whether it's dealing with greed, or it's dealing with ego, or it's dealing with resentment. All of these things we can see arise in our mind. And we're like, how do I get over this? What can I do about these things? We might notice there are people who are not afflicted by these same things, or have been afflicted in the past, but have gotten over it. This is a fundamental difference in the spiritual practitioner, somebody on a spiritual path, is that they're saying it's not simply about what I am in the moment, it's about what I can be. And there is a belief there inherent that I can be something better, I can be something more free of suffering. So we look to our environment, we look to the people around us for examples of what might help us get out of problems. But we can also look at what we have done in the past and whether or not it worked. And so this is where faith is synonymous with confidence, is that if we do the same thing and every single time we get an unpleasant, unwished for result, we can start to develop confidence that that's not the way to go about it. And this is actually working with incomplete information, because at the moment, we don't know what the right way of doing things is. We only know what the wrong way is, but that's still enough to work with. So say we're faced with a dilemma where it seems like it's between a rock and a hard place, or damned if you do, damned if you don't. Well, we can just look at what do we know in the situation? What have we seen in the situation in the past, and how did it work out? You say, well, I know if I speak with anger, it seems like a good idea, but it's never worked out in the past. And so maybe I should be careful about that. Or maybe if we say, oh, there was that one time where I practiced, letting go or forgiveness, and it seemed to help in the situation. Maybe that would be a direction I could go. Now, for some things that are very subtle, like working with ego or conceit or attachment to life, like what do you do with that? Everybody's attached to life, right? Everybody wants to keep living and not die. It's gonna take a lot of development, a lot of experimentation, a lot of just trying different things and learning and growing and experiencing to kind of develop confidence in what the right way is to relate to that thing. Like death, if we've never if we've never come across death, then how could we possibly know the right way to relate to it? But kind of realizing that we're scared or intimidated or uncertain about something like death is the first step. And then we look to people who deal with it skillfully, and we look to situations where it's manageable, and we look to positive qualities within ourselves that might arise even when faced with death, the possibility of our own death or the death of others. And we start to develop a repertoire of skills and mind states that we can use for that situation. And we do this with all kinds of things. It helps us get through the grocery store and to not buy every sweet looking dessert thing. We actually do get some of the healthy stuff, because we know from experience, we've developed confidence, like the healthy stuff leads to a more balanced lifestyle. We still throw in the little dessert here and there, but we have enough confidence that the long term is important too. Dealing with the precepts, a lot of this is based on faith, right? We don't necessarily know when we don't grab that thing that we want, not certain that it's offered. We don't know that we'll be more happy having not taken that thing than if we had taken it. But we can start to develop this confidence that those people who seem to be happy and relaxed and released have taken these same precepts. And so faith allows us to kind of insulate ourselves from all the unknowns in life. And this is a very valuable faculty. It's one of the most valuable faculties, because there's an incredible amount of things we simply don't know. We don't know what happens after death because we're alive. We haven't died yet. We don't know. We don't know what it's like to be enlightened. We don't know what the higher mind is like. We don't know what jhana is like necessarily, or we don't know what it's like to have completely pure loving kindness without a hint of resentment or attachment. Maybe we just don't know, but we can focus on what we do know. We do know that this seems to be good. It's been good in the past. It could continue to be good. We know that this seems to be bad. It created things that I didn't enjoy. So maybe I'll try to avoid that as much as I can. And I like to think of wisdom as complementing this in a way. Wisdom doesn't necessarily deal with what we know, but it deals with what we can intuit or surmise about a situation. So I like to think of wisdom as looking at the present to predict the future. And our wisdom deals with, again, these dilemmas. And a dilemma is very essential to the growth in wisdom. And we're presented with a situation where we have to ponder, where we have to consider, like, how does this work? What's the right course of action? So whereas faith is pretty straightforward. This hurts. Maybe I should stop doing it. This feels good. Maybe I should investigate, developing it. And then looking at people who seem to be successful and trying to emulate the good things and avoid the bad things. But with wisdom, we're having to decide what good and bad really are. And this is one of the great conundrums in our present day, is that a lot of our present culture is built on materialism, is built on results orientation, like do I make a lot of money? Do I become very popular? Do I become very influential? And if so, that's the right way. You look at these mega corporations and they do a lot of stuff that a lot of people are like, that seems like really immoral. It seems like really wrong. And yet at the end of the day, they look at their bottom line and they had to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuit settlements, but they made billions of dollars. So by those economics, it's like that was the right way to go because it made the most money. But now our wisdom has us taking a step back and saying, well, what do I want? What do I really want? And what if that was how I figured out what was good and bad? Because technically anything could be good and bad, but that's not the reality of our situation. We do suffer and we do get into these situations where we're faced with choices and they both seem unpleasant in the short term. They both seem like either way will be difficult. But our wisdom says, okay, well, what do I want to cultivate? What is pleasant to me? What direction do I want to go? What's in my best interests? And that's sort of like why we eat our vegetables and we limit the desserts, is because we know while it's less pleasant over time, it works out a net positive, because we're more at peace, we're more energetic, we're more healthy, we have less illness. So we can look and we can say, it's like, well, being healthy seems to be a state that I would like that. And so what if I was to say that that is a good state? And that helps give me a compass heading. So then I can look at this situation and look at the two choices and say, which choice will lead to more healthy and which choice leads to more unhealthy. And we can figure that out. We don't know. Again, we're working with imperfect information. We don't know how things will turn out, but we can use our wisdom and sort of figure out the direction things are going. And this is really essential to activating our practice of the precepts, or even something higher up like the 8 precepts, where we develop sense restraint, or we let go of dinner or sexuality, in order to experience states of peace that were inaccessible when we were mixed up with those things. This is based in not just faith, but wisdom. We're like, okay, this thing seems immediately unpleasant, and yet it's moving in this direction of renunciation, which I know produces good results. It's moving in this direction of letting go. It's moving in this direction of kindness. It's moving in this direction of contentment. And that's the direction I want to be heading. So this, whether or not it's immediately pleasant, seems to be profitable in the long run. And that it allows us to take a situation where both sides seem to be uncomfortable and say, yeah, but in the long run, this direction seems to be the direction I want to head. And that allows us to be a human being, basically, because we can't know everything and we can't predict everything. Even if we take the wise course, we're going to be challenged. There's things that were unexpected are going to turn up. But say we've developed wisdom and we've used that as our compass heading, well, then when we reach that unforeseen experience, we still have that same wisdom that we've cultivated that says, okay, now what's in the direction I want to go and what's away from the direction I want to go, what's in the direction I don't want to go. These things are the most fundamental faculties, faith and wisdom, for coming to what's called stream entry, or the point where we are independent, the point where we get what enlightenment is, even if just the tiniest little taste. We kind of get it, we understand what it's about, and we start moving in that direction. It requires both faith and wisdom. Now, if we have one strongly, whether we're willing to believe that enlightenment is possible and emulate those people who are on that path, or whether we see what's good and bad, and we recognize the truth in the Dhamma, and we start to chart a course based on it. Either one of those by itself will allow us to set down foundations. It'll allow us to start to make progress. But it's not until both are operating where we can draw from our previous experiences and where we can learn and predict, what faces us and where we're headed, and really sense the truth in a statement immediately, like, yeah, this is in accord with what I'm trying to accomplish, and okay, no, this is not. When we have both of those, we are independent. And again, we don't want to rely on just figuring things out intellectually. We don't want to rely on just doing what we're told. And even emulating enlightened beings doesn't always work. Because again, we don't know what things that an enlightened being does helped them become enlightened, and what things they do was just part of their personality. And so part of what got me thinking about dilemmas was a lot of the dilemmas that face us as practitioners. So we would like to get samadhi, and we would like to be able to sit down and be peaceful and happy and blissful and free. But we sit down and we're our knees hurt and our mind is racing, and it seems like we're getting the exact opposite result. But nevertheless, we can start to use these faculties and figure out what parts of what we're presented with will work, what parts have actually worked for us, and what parts are not essential, what parts don't work for us. So faith deals with what works for us, and we are emulating people and qualities that we have seen. We're working with previous knowledge, but it's to develop a certainty about what works, and it's going to be personal. And this is why nobody can tell you what exactly will work for you. They can tell you that to kill is always going to produce unpleasant results. They can tell you that to steal is always going to produce unpleasant results, that to lie is always going to produce unpleasant results. But they can't tell you that this particular action is not going to work for you, because they haven't lived your life. And there's a lot of things that we're faced with in practice, or in learning from teachers, or in going to different communities, where it's really upon us to look and to kind of say, I just don't have confidence that works. And that is okay. And in fact, any good teacher will say, do that. And furthermore, they will teach you to do that. Because no teacher who's on the path of enlightenment wants people to just do what they say, because they know that nobody will ever get enlightened by just doing what they say. Because after you leave the presence of your teacher, you're going to be presented with dilemmas. The teacher's not going to be there to tell you what to do. And any rule that they could create won't work in every single situation. So you've got to develop the ability to figure it out for yourself based on what has worked for you. And wisdom is this essential ability to figure out what's right and what's wrong. Yeah, because again, if you look at results or you look at pleasant or unpleasant, it's hard to establish, fundamentally what direction we want to head. This is pleasant now, but then it's unpleasant later. So maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But as your wisdom grows, you start to say that this leads in the direction of the pleasant. It's maybe not pleasant all the way through, but it leads towards health. It leads towards freedom. It leads towards kindness and forgiveness. So that's the direction to head, regardless of our immediate circumstances. And again, a teacher can't give you wisdom. You can be around a wise teacher your whole life. And if you just rely on their wisdom, you go to them with every single problem and let them figure out the right course, you won't grow. Wisdom is based on asking the questions and pondering and reflecting and figuring it out. And once you have made that your skill, then you don't actually need to go to anybody for advice. You will see that it inverts, it turns around. People start coming to you for advice, because this is actually a fundamental component of wisdom, is you recognize who's got it, who has clearer vision on the situation, on what you're being presented with. All of this culminates in a person being able to look at their world and being able to function within it, even though it is imperfect. And this is fundamental. It's what Buddhism is really all about, because once you develop the ability to figure out the course of action in any given situation, it doesn't matter what the current fad is, or it doesn't matter what people say. It doesn't even really matter what your teachers say, though you might consider and put some confidence or trust in what they say. But they don't have to be right all the time. It's not, you don't do what they say because you're certain they're right. You do what they say because you've sussed out that they're further along, that they've got a good idea, and that they're charting a course in the direction that you too want to head, if they haven't reached the goal as it is. And so this is at the greatest level, a lot of the things in our life we can't really know for sure. So in Buddhism, we teach about anicca, or impermanence, right? And we say that all conditioned things are impermanent. Well, technically, you can't know that, right? You can't be certain of that, because if there was something that was permanent somewhere out there, maybe you just haven't heard of it yet. But this is something that you can put to the test. You can develop your confidence every time you see something change or disintegrate or die. You can be like, okay, well, that's one in the camp of impermanence. And you just watch. You start counting up the tallies, and you're going to start finding, so, okay, I can't say authoritatively there's nothing in the universe that is not permanent. And yet every fiber of my being says this resonates with truth, because everything I've experienced says that things change, things pass away, so that new things can arise, right? And I've experienced this so much. And we reach a point where our imperfect knowledge is no longer a hindrance. I don't know that there isn't something permanent out there. And yet I can say time and again, all conditioned things are impermanent, because, it's almost like daring somebody to show me something is permanent. It's like it would blow my mind. But I would never chart a course based on the idea that there might be something permanent out there, because it just goes against everything that makes sense to me and everything I've experienced. So this is the fundamental realization of a stream enter, is they're like, oh, all conditioned things, all things that arise pass away, all conditioned things are impermanent. And it's not that they have looked at every single conditioned thing in reality. It's not that they have, looked at every single thing in their entire field of awareness and seen that this is not a permanent abiding self or soul, nobody has the time to look at every single thing. And even if they did, the things would change underneath them as they were doing it. Instead, what they have realized is the faith and the wisdom have allowed them to see that I can operate with this. I can operate on impermanence, and it will allow me to cultivate wholesome qualities. It will allow me to abandon unwholesome qualities. And then I don't need an answer to the question, is there anything permanent out there? Is there God? Is there a mortal soul? Is there any of this? I don't need to know. You know, I can let that go because I have what I need in the faith and the wisdom, in the ability to make choices, even when the choices are unpleasant, even when I don't have perfect knowledge. I can still make choices. I can still operate. Yeah, and that's very powerful. That's game-changing, really, because it allows you to always kind of be able to find your way. Whether or not you've got anybody to point out the right direction, you'll be able to figure it out. You'll be able to muddle through. Even if it takes lifetimes, you'll be able to work at it and consistently get better. And that's part of, you know, being a human being. There is dukkha. There are dilemmas. You will be presented with difficult choices, or you will hear things that your teacher said that don't seem to make sense, or you will see people in your community doing practices that seem to not be in accord with the Dhamma. And that shouldn't stop you from being able to do what you need to do. It shouldn't really mean anything. Like if something doesn't seem to work for you, or it doesn't seem to accord with your wisdom and your understanding of the Dhamma, you just leave it alone. Just let it go by. There's no reason it should cancel out the things that do work for you. And likewise, if something does work for you, then see if you can develop those things that work for you all the time. Yeah. Not just things that, I mean, obviously, like eating dessert works for you in the short term, but not all the time. Like 1 ice cream cone is great, 2 is mediocre, 3 is awful. Yeah. But renunciation always seems to help. Yeah. When it's done right, when it's done wisely. You know, kindness always seems to help. Forgiveness, compassion, they always seem to help. So maybe we can cultivate those things that, you know, always seem to make things better, to work in the right direction. And then it's not really a dilemma anymore. You know, you always, one side will be weighted in the direction that you want to go. And this is, you know, is the path in a nutshell. You're going to be, it's imperfect. It's suffering. There's suffering in all the choices. Yeah. The most wonderful things have this aspect of suffering, and still it won't stop you. It won't stop you from doing what works and what leads to greater and greater happiness. So these are some reflections on this Uposatha night.
Andamayanu Vardhamaratayu Sadhukaranganamase
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.